Chris Paul is in the NBA Finals. I just had to get that out there into the world. Just had to say it out loud. I've lived to see every second of his career. Of course, I haven't watched every second, but I've witnessed his entire career from the start. All the unfortunate parts, the injuries, the bad losses. I have seen everything, leading up to the point that he was traded to the Thunder last year, and we all assumed he was just kind of ending there. It was a rebuilding team, but for him, that was a dead end, being the age he was. And what a difference a year makes. Before we get to that, though, because there'll be plenty of praise, let's just do some housekeeping stuff real quick. Just some real general things. About the injuries, yeah, I'm just going to tell you right now, we don't care. Not that players were actually injured. Yeah, I wish Kawhi played. I really wish LeBron and AD were healthy. I wish all these guys were healthy. Nobody should ever go into a playoffs hoping to see teams just decimated by injury. That's boring. I thought 2013 was bad when we had Kobe and David Lee out. I remember there was like a short list of 4 or 5 stars that were out that year, and I took a picture of it. I have it somewhere. It probably won't be in this video, but I was so disappointed that year. And this year is that year on multiple steroids. So nobody should hope for that. But in the context that people are going to bring it up, in terms of trying to discredit a Chris Paul championship run, if he does in fact go on to win, if the Suns go on to win, in that context, we do not care. Or at least I don't. I'm gonna stop saying we, because really, who is we, right? I don't know who the fuck we is. I don't care, bro. I don't. First of all, I never really care. Aside from hating injuries and being absolutely sick when they happen, as it pertains to a particular team's championship, you never hear me with the asterisk talk and saying, oh, this doesn't count. Sure, some titles are far more special than others. I don't rate the Warriors Kevin Durant titles as highly as like the 2016 Cavs. I think there's different tiers, but at the end of the day, for whatever was happening in that particular year, they're always going to be the champions. It's always going to be written in the books. Years from now, when you come back after all the Mickey Mouse talk and, oh, this person was injured, they shouldn't have happened, that shouldn't have happened, that team is still going to be the champion. So aside from Twitter narratives and what you might individually think about them or what you might have them in for your ratings, it doesn't matter. They're still the champions. So I always feel that way about titles, but specifically this year, because I acknowledge that on this specific run, no, the Suns would not have won the championship if other teams were healthy. The Lakers would have beaten them. That was my pick. A healthy LeBron and AD, I am sure the Lakers would have won that series. And it was unfortunate because the Suns shouldn't have been playing them in the first place. So really, if teams were healthy, they wouldn't have had to play them in the first round. They would have played somebody else, some weaker team that they could have advanced past. But yes, we all know if AD was healthy, the Lakers probably win. Nuggets with Jamal Murray, I'm not so sure. It definitely would have been a better series, but I'm not sure the Nuggets would have won that. However, yes, also the Clippers with Kawhi, yeah, in that series against the Suns, they probably win that. They were in games without him, with Paul George trying to be facilitator and Patrick Beverley, depending on Patrick Beverley for offense and three-pointers, which we're going to talk about him later. But yes, absolutely, the Clippers got hold. It's the Clippers curse. This is just what happens. But I fully acknowledge that I believe this Clippers team would have won with Kawhi. I also do not care. I care that he was injured. I wish he hadn't have been. But in terms of Chris Paul's run, I don't care, bro. He's always been on the other side of this. Always, always, always. If you're talking about teams that Chris Paul and the Suns have played injured, talk about the times that a team played Chris Paul when he was injured, or somebody, one of his biggest help pieces or support pieces were injured. We got to talk about that as well. When Blake Griffin goes down a couple of years, when he goes down, when he broke his hamstring with the Rockets, it almost happened this year. We were this close to seeing Chris Paul dislocate his shoulder or tear something there and probably go out in the first game of the playoffs. He has always been on the other side. He's always been the unfortunate and or injured team. So if he wins, and when people discredit the championship, I don't care. You've got this one time where he's been barely lucky enough to make it. He's been injured like 2 or 3 times. Apparently he's got torn ligaments in his hand right now. He just found out a couple of days ago. He had COVID that almost took him out of the beginning of this series, when at the time we didn't really know that Kawhi was out for the entire series. And he still got 4 games to win. Anything could happen in that span between now and then. So yeah, we, whatever, don't care, bro. So now that that's out of the way, I hadn't really been making videos on this series. I wanted to see which way it was going to go. Kind of had the feeling the Suns should have got it done in 5, and I wasn't as motivated with it just being Paul George, and then Zubac went out. I thought that was big because although in the last game they found a way to contain him, they had a lot of people crashing, they zoned up a bit, still playing small is something you do not want to do against Phoenix. That's what we said coming into the series. You couldn't play small against them like you could the Jazz, because Aiden is actually a threat. You can give him the ball and he can do things. So the Clippers just face setback after setback, and it's a damn shame. It really is, because it probably should have been theirs. year. The Lakers went out, so you didn't even have to deal with that. And more importantly than whatever happened or what was happening with the other rosters, they just built some identity. They built resilience. They built character. This was not the Clippers team that we had seen in previous years that just looked like absolute clowns when they were facing adversity. They came back and they faced adversity the entire playoffs. PG was in and out, and he never stopped battling. Had an elimination game for the ages. Not this one, but what was that, game 5 with 41 points. Had to step back into that Indiana role, and it was perfect because this Clippers team, they weren't scrubs without Kawhi. Reggie Jackson stepped up, and I think what's going to be forgotten as years come along is that he was maybe producing at a star level. So you're gonna go into 2023, 2024, and when people start doing retrospectives, it's gonna be like, oh, they almost made the finals with Reggie Jackson as the second best player. Crazy thing is, you're gonna go back and look and say he was really playing like that dude though. It wasn't just some random guy who was having outbursts. He was taking and making important shots. Hell, when Kawhi was on the floor, when he was still there against the Jazz, he was sometimes playing as the second best player. So Jackson wasn't just some scrub, but I do agree that he will probably go and get overpaid by some team this summer. Don't know if he'll be back in LA, but with this playoff run, there will be somebody out there, possibly, that will tie up their franchise, throwing a contract at him, and we'll see how that plays out. Maybe he'll go and evolve into a star somewhere. Maybe it'll be like, damn, we gave that guy crazy money off of one run. I don't know, but I can definitely see some team throwing a bag out there. Terrence Mann stepped into a role when he wasn't even playing in certain series, or for the beginning of certain series, they was like, oh, he's out of the rotation, and he came out and had multiple great games. This team, it was just great to see the Clippers grow up. This was a very fascinating run. It was great to see them not just fold in all the worst circumstances. And if Kawhi chooses to stay, which I really think he will, we could see them go on a run next year. It's unfortunate. It was supposed to be, when PG and Kawhi got together, it was supposed to be like immediate NBA Finals, possible immediate championship. Of course, you had COVID last year, and then they folded afterwards. This year was just injuries. It's unfortunate, man. It's unfortunate. This is what happens to the Clippers. Once again, it is called the Clippers curse. I'm going to have to update that video that I made in 2019. Yeah, here we are 2 years later. I have to add the Paul George and Kawhi saga to it, because it's a real thing. But they battled, and so did the Suns. So did the Suns. As much as people are going to be talking about their playoff run and how everybody they played was pretty much decimated by injuries, you can't put it past that when Chris Paul came to this team, they were supposed to be, what, a second round out at best. We had looked at them as a mid-level squad that would definitely advance past the first, but shouldn't be able to contend with the top dogs of the West. Even if guys hadn't been decimated by injuries, I think they probably could have still at least made the conference finals, depending on who they played. If they had got a healthy Clippers in the second round, who knows? But again, if they had got the Nuggets with Jamal Murray still in the second, I think that with this squad that's a series, they could have won. It's not just one or two guys here. Hell, Chris Paul, although he has definitely gone on some runs like last night where he just put a team away. What did he end with? 30-something, 40-something? Yeah, he goes on those runs, but then you have campaign behind him who, in certain parts of the series, seemed to be scoring better. He seemed to be a little bit more active on the offensive end, which is cool because it's not a competition. It's his backup, and you need that just in case something happens, just in case Paul tweaks something or hurts himself flopping. So it's been amazing to see Payne step up into that role when people were questioning if he was an NBA player. Cam Johnson hitting threes. Devin Booker and Aiden in their first playoff run. Now, we got to keep the same energy, bro. We got to keep the same energy because people always made so much of guys being in their first playoffs. When LeBron was playing with the Cavaliers, they were saying, oh, this is Kyrie and Kevin Love's first playoffs, even though, well, Kevin Love got hurt there. He got his shoulder pulled, but he was shooting well before that. Kyrie, for the times that he was on the court, you couldn't tell at all that it was his first time in the playoffs. That was the thing. People were like, oh, he's playing with an inexperienced squad, yada, yada. All right, so we got to keep that same energy for the Suns, right? Because you go to Booker and Aiden. Booker, I think, played better in previous series than he did against the Clippers, but he went on to put the Lakers away in that one game, played well against Denver, and here they are in the NBA Finals in their first run. And this is an endeavor that Chris Paul chose to take on. OKC gave him the freedom to look at places he wanted to go. Nobody would have, I would say a year ago, nobody would have pegged Chris Paul for looking at the Suns and saying, yeah, I absolutely want to go there. If it was his choice, I don't think a lot of people saw that. So he goes to a team where people were calling Devin Booker an empty stat player, which is just the dumbest narrative for young guys who were playing on bad teams to begin with. But whatever. They called him empty stats, so you got to keep that energy. You also got to keep the energy for Aiden, where people were like, you never know which Aiden you're going to get, because you might forget, this league is really what have you done for me lately. You might forget during the regular season, Aiden was not a sure thing, where he kind of is now. Other thing to keep in mind is the Suns were first seed in the West. It's not like they were an 8th, 7th, or 6th seed that just cleared a path in the playoffs. They were winning during the regular season, would have had a much harder time getting out of the West, but also they were playing playing great basketball, so this is not some team that hadn't been playing good basketball to begin with. Whatever, man, they're here now, and they are going to be playing either Milwaukee or the Atlanta Hawks, Suns-Hawks finals. That's very possible right now. So that's even more interesting because with Giannis being out, we don't know when he's going to come back. If the Bucks did make the finals, I'm going to assume with the way Giannis's leg bent that he would miss at least 2 of those games. Again, not a doctor, have no clue, but they haven't ruled him out for the playoffs. Hell, they haven't even ruled him out for the Hawks series. So, don't know where it's going, but yeah, people, that'll be another team that the Suns played if they were to play the Bucks. Then if they were to play the Hawks, yeah, the Hawks are actually one of those teams that were mid throughout the regular season, then ended up going to the finals. Now, interesting thing, it's going to look like in hindsight, if the Hawks end up playing the Suns, in hindsight it's going to look like the Hawks made it because everybody else got injured. We're going to, things are going to blur together. We're going to remember 2021 is the year everybody got hurt, and we're going to see the Hawks in the finals and say there's just no way in hell. That's not a real year. Completely forgetting that there wasn't an injury that benefited the Hawks until the last moment. They got through the Sixers healthy, and Embiid played, and he was dominant for most of that series. And they were very competitive against the Bucks. They could have had 2 games even with Giannis being on the court. So yeah, now when he's out, it'll look like, damn, they got there because Giannis got hurt. But they were competitive before that. They won game 1. They were actually up 16 in game 2, and I think they ended up going down before Giannis got hurt, but still, that was without Trae Young. So I think Hawks in the finals, if it does happen, will look a lot worse than it actually was. But again, narratives, it's gonna look a lot worse. It's gonna look like the Suns had one of the easiest runs ever. And I don't care, man. Sure, maybe for the ratings, like I said, the Warriors had easy runs. They lost 1 game, 1 playoff series or playoff year when they had Kevin Durant. I don't look at that with high esteem, but I still acknowledge them as champions. They won it. It's always gonna be there. That was their year. It'll be the same thing with the Suns if they win. Whatever happened, happened, but that was their year. And it was Chris Paul's year. And it'll eventually be buried by history. Hell, the 2012 finals, I see that got buried a lot faster than I thought it would. That was a lockout year. I grew up, I started making NBA videos, and came to find out some people didn't even know what a lockout was. When I was living through 2012, all types of people were saying shit about the Heat's championship and how it didn't count and it wasn't a real season. And actual NBA players saying that dumb shit. It was a narrative. It was alive at the time. And then 8-9 years later, I had people trying to tell me that was never a narrative when I fucking lived through it. I used to go through these threads. That was an actual thing. People used to say in 2012, but they ceased to care. The Heat didn't have to play the Bulls that year. Derrick Rose tore his ACL. The Celtics with, gosh, the old version of the Big Three almost made the finals. Ray Allen, I believe, wasn't even a starter anymore. Or he was close to not being a starter because of an ankle injury. And that team was almost in the finals because there was hella injuries in 2012. But it got buried because that's just what happens in championship runs. The Heat won that year. It was thought possible that they could win that year, and then they went and did it. Just like it was thought possible the Suns could win this year, and they went and did it. The final thing to talk about with injuries is it is interesting to see how much people go at the schedule. Because while I am not protecting what the NBA did this year, a lot of the injuries in the playoffs were freak accidents. We just had more of those this year than ever. Or a lot of the injuries that affected the playoffs were freak accidents. Like when Jamal Murray got hurt, when he went down, that was a routine fast break where his knee collapsed that could have happened at any point. As soon as it happened, I saw people on Twitter like, fuck the NBA, fuck the schedule makers, oh, this is greedy. If you go back and watch the Jamal Murray play, I don't really think that had a whole lot to do with the schedule. He just collapsed. He got at a bad angle and his knee crumbled. I saw a graph that showed 9 players that are out in the playoffs right now, and 6 of those were just accidents. Kyrie's ankle, accident. Giannis' knee, accident. They had Murray on there. I just went over that, accident. Chris Paul almost went out with that shoulder, accident. Like all of those were, all the major ones that we're looking at that really affect where we are right now, a lot of those were just accidents. Hell, you might even argue James Harden's hamstring. I don't want to just put that on him, but he did not really seem like he was in shape when he came into this year. So you might be able to look at that and say it played some role into why he just kept re-injuring that hamstring. Of course, scheduling and whatever. So I think that I would give that the benefit of the doubt and go schedule. But also remember, he was not in shape when he came into the season. He didn't look it at least. So as much as people do go at the schedule, the unfortunate events that landed us here have a lot to do with just bad angles. But it is what it is. People are going to have their angles. Let me know what yours is on the Suns championship run, Chris Paul's championship run. And look, I posted on Twitter yesterday. I've been waiting to see Chris Paul break through since he was, if you go back and look at his picture in NBA 2K8 where there's no detail in the players whatsoever, like that's how long I've been looking at him as a top point guard and waiting for him to really lead a team or really have the luck to be able to lead NBA team to the finals, because that's Steve Kerr. I always go back to that. He was 100% right. Championship runs, they take a lot, and then they take some luck. I've been waiting for him to have that since those days, since the 2K8 days, when all you had to do was spam pick and roll and throw alley-oops that were magnetized. They couldn't be blocked. That was a time. But anyways, yeah, let me know what you think. Hit the like button, sub. Greatest playoff series of all time, part 5 will be out on the main channel today. That is the end of that series. Been a lot of fun. So check that out, and I will see y'all on the next one.